The Unreal 5 remake of Oblivion has been further detailed after first leaking in September 2023. Oh my god, it's been a while.
Wow, that's
been a little while since September 2023. The game is apparently coming in June, as a former developer from Studio Virtuous who are working on the game, on the remake, has outlined the title is fully remade, focusing on 6 key pillars of the game: stamina, sneak, blocking, archery, hit reaction, and the HUD itself. Blocking and sneaking have apparently been made less frustrating, with the HUD being overhauled to make it appeal to younger players. This is all according to the write-up on mpfirst.com. Who also corroborates some different information as well. Hit reactions are included when fighting NPCs, and archery has been revamped so it's more satisfying in first and third person. While the title was once listed as a remaster, it seems to have transformed into a full remake over time. Do you want this, mate?
Well, here's the thing.
Go on.
Yes.
Yes.
I do want it because, as you know, I'm a big fan of remakes and remasters, Scott.
You can't get enough.
Especially full-on remakes, which this sounds like it is. You know, that's probably going to change things from the ground up, make stuff like the archery better, stuff like the combat better. And I like the idea of this. Oblivion is a great game. It is the title that kind of got me into RPGs.
I think a lot of people have that feeling.
Generally, like, I couldn't believe it. Picking up an Xbox 360 for the first time and jumping in Oblivion and having that reactive open world sandbox and being able to do whatever the hell you want as a weird cat person.
And back then it looked gorgeous as well.
It did. I mean, the faces was a bit ropey for the time, but it did look gorgeous. It was like Cyrodiil as a map is beautiful. Like something that I'm playing now, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, kind of harkens back to that. Not classical fantasy era, but that more colorful, that more pre-Game of Thrones fantasy era, if you will.
Yeah, it's like a fairy tale, more high fantasy. It's not going for the gritty stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of stories within Oblivion that are, you know, still worth telling today. A lot of cool mechanics. For instance, the Oblivion gates themselves, which can open out of nowhere and transport you to an entirely different realm where you have to escape from it and stuff like that. Lots of cool ideas is what I'm trying to say. And if Skyrim, you know, owes so much to Oblivion, of course it does, but if Skyrim can have the tail that it's had and became this huge success that is constantly re-released, I think we can throw Oblivion a bone and get a remake, because I do think it admittedly needs a remake.
Well, that's kind of the thing. It's like, why pick this one? Like, I feel like Oblivion is the fan favorite. Like, a lot of people obviously adore Skyrim. Oblivion has that little niche where it was one of the first games to do it on console. And I think a lot of people have a vision in mind when you say Oblivion. They remember the tower, and they remember some of the parts of the hood and like the bloom effects and everything when you were first exploring, and Patrick Stewart at the beginning or whatever. So I guess you're kind of trading on that a little bit. I think it's an interesting thing for Bethesda because they've not done any high-end remasters before. As a studio, they're in a bit of a weird place with Starfield not necessarily bombing, but not doing very well at all. Like, the general word of mouth just wasn't positive whatsoever. And that game's only gone on to be abandoned by community, the fan community. There's no mods for it, things like that. So it's a bit of an interesting pivot for them. And obviously this thing was greenlit before Starfield came out, but in the current landscape they have, being like, remember when we did stuff that you loved? Well, do you want to buy it again?
I know there's a cynical way to view that, right? But Bethesda in the modern day, they take, like so many other studios, it's not just them. When you're making an RPG that is 100 hours plus with a huge sandbox, it takes a long time to put them together, right? So we're probably going to be waiting a long time before the next Elder Scrolls, the mainline Elder Scrolls game. I don't even want to think about how old I'm going to be the next time I get a Fallout, a new mainline Fallout game.
Didn't Todd Howard say the next time he does one, he'll be dead after that?
He did.
He said he's only got 2 more games in his life or something.
He said, like, don't worry, Fallout 5's coming, and I'm like, you announced Elder Scrolls 6 in 2018. That was almost 7 years ago. I'm getting on, Todd.
We're all getting on.
I don't have time to play all of these games anymore. But what was the point I was trying to make? Oh, yeah. With that frequency or infrequency of major releases from Bethesda, I just think it makes sense to plug the gaps, remind people of these franchises why they should be excited for Elder Scrolls 6 anyway. I mean, how many kids now won't even have played Skyrim by the time Elder Scrolls 6 comes out?
Well, I'm realizing that teenagers, they would have, if someone was born in the year of Skyrim, they were a teenager last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a long time.
Exactly.
I mean, Skyrim's got a hell of a tail on it, but it is one of those things where unless you dig it out of the archives, it's an old game, quote unquote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't do the maths to figure out how it would compare to a game its age in 2011 if you were going back, but it would have been a long, long time, right? You're going back
like 1998, something from 98.
Exactly. So I think this way you get to experience a new version of these games that everyone loves, and it just keeps the franchise in the conversation. Like, I know maybe I'm asking for so little, but I've wanted a New Vegas remaster for ages. Same with Fallout 3. So I would love to see these games return, especially because, like I said, it's going to be a long, long time until I see a mainline game. And if you're not going to do proper spin-offs like New Vegas, which it doesn't seem like they are bothered about, seems like they're more focused on the MMO side of things or the multiplayer side of things with Fallout 76 and the Elder Scrolls Online. If you're not going to add more new games, then why not just give us remasters and remakes?
I am curious about mentioning all the different things that are going to change about gameplay. Like, you know, for me, I mean, I'm honestly not a big Oblivion guy. Like, I played it back in the day. I didn't really click with it. I thought the combat just felt horrible. And I did really dislike the HUD. Like, I thought the lockpicking stuff looked terrible. The speech, when you're talking to people, the different conversation option stuff looked horrible. I couldn't figure the map out very well. I thought that thing was horrible. So I was like, I tried Oblivion so much. I still would have about 10, 15 hours in it. But after a while, my friends were so much further in it than me, singing its praises, giving it the big one, and I was like, I'm not latching onto any of this stuff, and I didn't become an Elder Scrolls guy until Skyrim, so I wonder how much you overhaul that stuff, but judging by your reaction, maybe you don't need to.
I don't know. I don't know what people think about this, because there are so many wonky parts of Oblivion that have not really aged well, especially stylistically, might be seen as outdated today. But the HUD, you can definitely streamline it, don't get me wrong. You can make it more readable, you can maybe update the map and how it works, but the way it looks, I think, is so integral to the overall Oblivion feel. It's got that old-timey storybook page-turning feel to it that, again, is in something like Kingdom Come, like, harkening back to the overall aesthetic. So when I was reading this report, that was the one bit that worried me, because I can see it losing some of its sauce, losing some of its personality. Well,
especially when it's like making it for younger players.
Exactly.
That's immediately like Roblox Fortnite. What are we doing?
Exactly. So if you kind of make it more generic, I think you kind of do a disservice to the overall look and vibe of it. It's the same as if they take too much inspiration from Skyrim, say, well, people loved the changes that they made in the sequel. Let's bring some of them over to Oblivion. But at what point does it stop being Oblivion and just become the Elder Scrolls, the brand? You know?
That's true. I think, part of the work they need to do is kind of reminding people what Elder Scrolls used to be, where it is right now, and where it can go. It is interesting. Obviously, it's not Bethesda first party who are doing this remaster that became a remake. It is Virtua Studios, and it is on Unreal 5. It's not their own engine, which everything else they've done was either on Cryo or the other one. I forget what the name of the other engine is, but most of that stuff has always been done in-house. So it is an interesting thing, being like, we've waited this long for the next main Elder Scrolls. Something comes along from a different studio who aren't Bethesda and says, well, we would change the combat this way. And then everyone else goes, that's actually a great way to do a combat system. And it's like, and then Bethesda are like, that's not what we were doing for the main one. So I guess they see how that comes together.
It's kind of like when Bluepoint did Demon's Souls. And even though a lot of people didn't like that remake, that was, I think, undoubtedly a beautiful game. It's still one of the best looking games on PS5. And then obviously Elden Ring is cross-gen and has a better overall art style. You know, it still looks gorgeous, but in terms of the raw,
like Demons,
in terms of the raw technical, like, texture quality and stuff like that, like, it doesn't have the Demons level sort of sheen to it. Elden Ring's still better, but you know what I mean? It still has that kind of uneasy comparison of, this other studio's done this with our tool set. Now we weirdly have these extra expectations that we didn't have.
There's a whole, because we did a video on remakes and remasters, would have been at the end of last year, the different ways to approach them. Like right now, there's the whole Crystal Dynamics approach that they've done with Soul Reaver and Tomb Raider, where it's like barely aesthetical changes. You're just sort of bringing them up to speed or whatever, but that's about it. Overall, though, you look at someone like Night Dive, who brought back the Thing game, and then went in there and, by their own admission, rewrote like 200 lines of code or whatever, and added all these different lighting effects. And made it a more modern release as much as they can with something that came out in like 2004 or whatever. But they are bringing that to someone else's work kind of thing. I know they had a lot of consultancy, and I think members of the original team were part of that. But it is interesting. Like remakes and remasters in the gaming industry are different to the film industry to a degree. And it is interesting going like, okay, here's a body of work for someone who didn't work on it. What would you guys change? And then them going like, well, the HUD kind of sucks, so we're going to do this. And then if you were part of the original team, you'd be like, no, because this was the intent. And there are other ways to bring that stuff together.
No, I definitely get that. And I often champion remakes that take big swings because I do like to see that element. I like to see another team who maybe grew up with Oblivion have their own thoughts and opinions on what worked, what didn't, and then get the opportunity to do a remake because,
it's a fan mob with a price tag at that point.
With hundreds of millions of dollars behind it, though. I don't know. I mean, is it though? Is it just to say a fan can't
there's
work
nothing wrong
on
with that.
a game franchise without it being a mod, I think is a...
Sonic Mania is the best fan mod of all time.
But that started out as a fan mod, is what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
no.
Well, Christian Whitehead was modding Sonic for a long time. Then he got given the keys to the kingdom by
There we
Sega
go.
and made Sonic Mania.
There we go,
The Mania
yeah.
itself was from the ground up.
What I mean is, like, it's, I don't know, it's someone growing up with these franchises, is
Yes.
loving those franchises, and eventually getting the chance to work on those franchises, who have their own thoughts and opinions and love it so much, and they want to maybe put their own spin on it. Overall, the point was just that, fan mod or not, I like that element of it. I like to see proper swings in remakes, even if they don't always hit, which for me, a complete change to the HUD probably wouldn't work. But the original's always going to exist, and as long as that is kept accessible, I like the idea of seeing a new interpretation on it, because it's been a long time since Oblivion came out, and we've learned a lot as players and as RPG
As humans.
makers since then. But I do think you've got to change a lot in terms of making it feel good to play now, because like you said, the combat doesn't hold up very well today. It's extremely floaty. So is the archery, so is the sneaking. A lot of it you put up with at the time because it was like, well, this is an RPG. You know, we don't expect the full package in the way that we kind of do from a game now.
It's also, I'll move on, but it is interesting that, you think of things like, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is one of the only games that's doing the first-person Elder Scrolls adjacent experience, like the full level of immersion where every single thing you do matters. Not that many other studios can attempt that. Like one of the bigger AAA premium versions was Cyberpunk, and that took like a long time to get fixed and whatever. So it is a hard thing to do, and it kind of does bridge a gap of like, Elder Scrolls 6 isn't ready yet. It's not going to be ready for a long time. Even when they greenlit this, let's put a remaster out. Let's have that bridge the gap. Keep the Elder Scrolls name going. I mean, Elder Scrolls Online's still going, but it works as a bridge in a way.
Exactly. I mean, I want to go back to the fan mod thing again.
Yes.
Not to dwell in it, but I think it's a good point because, we talked about Bethesda maybe being precious about having the keys to the kingdom or whatever. You look at something like Fallout, and I really like Bethesda's work on Fallout. I like Fallout 3, I like Fallout 4, but New Vegas is the one for me. That's my favorite Fallout game ever, and that wasn't Bethesda who made it. It was Oblivion. A lot of the people who worked on the original... Oblivion on the mind. It was Obsidian, with a lot of the people who worked on the original Fallout games pre-Bethesda. So it's funny that, in a way... Bethesda's employees at the time probably maybe had a similar trajectory of people who are working on Oblivion now, whereby they might have grown up with Fallout, had their own ideas, put their spin on it with Fallout 3, and then you got the original creators coming back with Fallout New Vegas, trying to continue the story they left off in 2.
Dude,
you've kind of got these two warring views, which kind of still continues to this day, where you've got... I think they're described as the West Coast Fallouts and the East Coast Fallouts, and the East Coast is Bethesda's baby, and the West Coast is the previous developers.
Well, I only mentioned that as a general perspective on it. The idea that you have a work that belongs to a certain set of people or authors or whatever you want to call it, and over enough time it gets given to different studios who then bring their own secret sauce in. But if you extended that thing all the way out, then Bethesda have made the best fan mods of all time because they acquired. They made Elder Scrolls, but they acquired Fallout from Black Isle and then went on to... I remember at the time, how old I am, I remember the conversations when Fallout 3 was coming out with, not my Fallout. It's not top-down. It's not more strategic and turn-based, or slower and everything. I remember that whole thing. And Brotherhood of Steel was, hated at the time. That spin-off thing,
It's interesting, man. Again, going back to that Jason Schreier book, when I was reading that over Christmas, there's a great story about Blizzard North, I think they were at the time, who made the original Diablo, but they envisioned that as a separate studio, and then they were acquired by Blizzard. So then Diablo was sort of this studio's baby, but it wasn't the quote-unquote main Blizzard team that was working on it. So by the time Blizzard North sort of shut down and disbanded or was heavily reduced and the original creators of Diablo left, it finally got put in the hands of the Blizzard regular team, and they approached Diablo 3 as sort of what they would have done with the first 2 games if they had more creative control over it. So stuff like this, I love it when it happens. What were you think? What was your plan for this? Has this always been your vision? What would you have done if you had the full keys to the kingdom? There are always, people who do this for a living, you guys listening to this, no doubt have very strong opinions on where you want franchises to go. People like us get into games and then have a say on these franchises, for better or worse, whether it aligns with your view or not. And I just think that's nicer in my eyes than having a handbook that you got to stick to.
Yeah. It's and especially in the case of Oblivion, like I said, it's so beloved that there is a sizable fan portion, sizable fan influence on that. We'll see how it turns out.